Hello and welcome back to the Elite Formula Physio and Training podcast. And we are back to race week in Formula One. How are we, Matt?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Yeah, back to race week. It seems to have come around in quick succession now. It feels like we're getting back into the routine of back-to-back races again. So it feels like the season is well underway and settling into the new routine.
Yeah, they'll come thick and fast now. Obviously, a week off was nice for everyone after kind of like 3 weekends in a row, wasn't it? With testing and then Bahrain and then Saudi. But yeah, we had a pretty busy kind of in between week, Matt. Do you want to sort of give us an update on where you've been, what you've been up to?
Yeah, so it's been a busy couple of weeks. We were out with the GT4 series out in France at Paul Ricard doing some testing, and then we went straight over to Misano to do another couple of days of testing. So a really good opportunity to kind of try some new tracks for the drivers and some tracks they've done before, but in new car setups. And then also today we are back in London testing some of our Superbike athletes, kind of doing some of their retesting. So for those that listened a few months back now, we've done some initial testing, and today we've got them back in to kind of really summarize and demonstrate really the kind of what we've done fitness wise, and just see if there's any little fine tuning bits we might want to do for those guys. They've got about 3 or 4 weeks now until race one. So it's just a nice opportunity to give them a bit of a confidence boost that the off season's done exactly what we wanted it to. And also just to kind of find if there's any small areas that we might want to tweak before then. So busy in the build up.
Yeah, and it's a nice time to do it, isn't it? Because you've obviously tested at the start of pre-season. They've then gone into, what has it been? 6 weeks, 7 weeks of a good pre-season, so they can, not only see the benefits of what they've been doing pre-season, and it kind of reinforces it for pre-seasons to come as well. Are you retesting everything, or are you kind of highlighting some key bits that you want to sort of nail down with those guys?
Yeah, good question. So with the more kind of physiological testing stuff, we're kind of retesting everything. So from the strength parameters, we've kind of got a battery of tests that we've kind of devised on the motorsport side of things. So we'll redo all of those tests. Just so we can have a good look at all of those parameters. Naturally, there would have been some focuses. So we basically develop a report for those drivers and riders around areas that we wanted them to focus on. So obviously, naturally, when we come to review that data, we'll kind of hone in on those areas. There's a little bit more focus around the mental side of things now as well. So we haven't quite got the same psychological involvement that we had at session one, just because there's not as much we need to cover. So there'll be a bit of a summary where we'll go through that. So physiologically, yes, there's definitely all the same tests. Psychologically, slightly fewer on this one.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And have there been any, from what you've seen so far, any big improvements in certain areas for these guys? And also, I guess, what's the key areas for the bikers here? What's the, if you're testing today, and what's the kind of one or two things you really don't want to see come back on the low side?
Yeah, good question. So so far we've only done the VO2 max testing today. We're waiting to do the strength parameters, but initially the response has been really, really good. The bikes are quite a unique series in the sense of they start on a Friday, but actually their amount of track time from Friday through till Sunday is pretty intense, and the kind of bike stuff is super physical. So really that VO2 max testing needs to be really, really important, and we want to see good changes there. We're probably in the fortunate position of both our riders are extremely fit, so actually trying to find those small margins is tricky. But actually, the data we've seen this morning already, they've both jumped up huge amounts.
Oh,
It's
wow.
quite
Okay.
interesting. Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually. The two riders won't mind me saying, but we've got one rider who was looking to drop some weight. Is a tall chap. So actually, naturally, when you drop weight, you'll often see that your VO2 max goes up just because of the weight loss when you compare it per gram. So that's quite interesting. But actually, we've got another rider who was looking to gain weight, but actually he saw probably the biggest gains in his VO2 max despite the weight gain. So that's been really interesting to see as well.
Yeah, wow, that's good. That's good. And his like training profile. So obviously I guess the weight gain, he's added, lean muscle mass, um, and improved his VO2 max. Has he focused on strength training over cardio training, or has it been a good mix? Because, a lot of people kind of look at improvements in cardiovascular output and feel that you can't always get that from weight training, but actually, pitching your strength training right can also give you cardiovascular improvements as well.
Yeah.
Where was he kind of sitting with that? Because I mean, that's
Yeah.
awesome, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, and definitely it's definitely a case of tailoring it to your athletes. I mean, in that example, we definitely had, I would say, predominantly a strength focus. We had a few injuries to manage, and actually our primary focus was lean muscle mass. So I would say that 75% of our training, maybe slightly less, has been very much strength orientated. So to see that change, it's definitely been through making sure that the cardio sessions we do have really good intent. So that's been really important. Whereas on the other side of the fence with the other rider, where we've been looking to lose weight, probably been slightly more cardio focused, and actually the strength scores there were reflective of that. In the initial kind of screening, we felt that the strength scores were actually really good. So if we could maintain or improve there a little bit, whereas actually we probably wanted a little bit more of the cardio base and the weight loss. Whereas, as I say, the side of the garage where we're looking to put on the weight, and we already had this phenomenal cardiovascular base. If we kept that VO2 max score, we'd have probably been quite happy, to be quite honest. So to actually see improvements, we're really chuffed with. It's just an added bonus more than anything.
Yeah, no, it's good. And, I asked the question because I've been working with a lot of endurance athletes recently, cyclists, runners, and triathletes. And, I'm mainly working with them because they've picked up an injury and, we're looking to improve their training for years to come in terms of dealing with niggles and implementing strength conditioning so they can reduce the risk of injury. But in a period of time when maybe they can't run, it just shows that actually doing some strength training and maybe their rehab work, they're not going to lose VO2 max. We can at least maintain it. And actually, with the right application, you could even improve it from a perspective there. So I think it has a nice transition, nice crossover into other athletes that we work with. So yeah, no, that's cool. And all guns blazing over here as well with those endurance athletes. I had one of the Red Bull triathletes back home from Miami yesterday after competing in the T100, and we've got another race in 3.5 weeks and a few things to iron out. So all of that information is good info for us as we build to the next race there. So no, sounds good, excellent. And so it's Formula One week again. Everyone will already be over there. Actually, it's Thursday now, isn't it? So it'll be media day anyway. But seems to be like a lot of people went even earlier this year from following some of the other performance guys on socials and stuff. It all seemed like they were out there at the weekend, and because I've always sort of left on a Tuesday, but these guys were leaving kind of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, kind of latest. So
Yeah.
I think people are becoming more aware of jet lag and the need to get there and get on the time zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was similar to you, Brad. I think a lot of colleagues that we know in that kind of world as well. Yeah, seeing Instagrams go up on Friday, Saturday, and they're already in Australia. So I think definitely that. I think learning from the past. You've got a few guys that have worked with athletes historically. So I guess learning lessons of the past, depending on how your athletes have adjusted previously, it will be a bit of an individual thing. But yeah, I think everyone seems to be getting over there very early, getting used to that time zone and kind of that shift. But no, it definitely seems to have been earlier this year than we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, and it's the biggest shift you have to make, isn't it? Well, apart from obviously Vegas over to Qatar. I don't know if that is still the case this year. I'm not even sure, but that was obviously a big one last year. But for an early on in the season shift, Australia is pretty big for people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, super exciting race to say, but yeah, having that week break just allows you to take a bit more time to get across, get acclimatized to the time difference and just try and reset your body clock a little bit so you're as fresh as you possibly can be. And I guess the earlier you're prepared to do that, the kind of better in a way. But again, it's having that way up, particularly for the staff. But yeah, it's definitely, I guess, beneficial to the drivers to get over there as early as they possibly can and shift.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we've spoken about travel over to Australia and jet lag on kind of previous podcasts, but again, just to give the listener an insight. So normally traveling to Australia, you would shift east. So in the days leading up. So again, you the general rule of thumb is for every hour that you shift, you should shift a kind of day before. But, in busy lives, in between races, even just for the normal person, I don't really feel that that's a possibility. You're not going to be shifting 7, 8 days beforehand and getting onto Australia time. So our general recommendation is 3 days before you start to do a kind of small shift towards that time. So you start waking up an hour earlier, going to bed an hour earlier. Wake up 2 hours early, go to bed 2 hours earlier, and then day of flight, wake up 3 hours earlier, and then obviously you're getting into the flights. And flights are normally split to Australia. The route I always used to take was London to Singapore, and then Singapore to Melbourne. And the key thing with sleep on those flights is the first flight you need to sleep on, because that's going to be a night time out in Australia. And that's the hard thing, because that'll be a 9, 10 o'clock flight out of London to Singapore. So as early as you can get up on that day. So I'd normally get up at like 2 a.m. And then once I get onto the flight, I can get in and go to sleep. And then when you get into Singapore, you want to get as much light as you can. You can use caffeine, and then you want to stay awake on the second flight, because then you're going to be landing into Australia, around 6, 7, 8 p.m. And you want to kind of have your dinner, get into your bedtime routine, and go to sleep. And I actually used to find Australia quite easy to do, because that was quite an easy thing for me to do, to get up early, sleep on that first flight, stay awake on the second flight. But it all depends on kind of how you get up. Because a lot of people, won't get up at 2 a.m. on the day of the flight, because they don't have to be at the airport till 7, 8, 9 a.m. But it was never a big one for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And we talked to a lot of people about, I know we've had this conversation a lot. We've actually been on another talk this week about kind of sleep and recovery in drivers in particular. But as you say, it's just trying to make sure. I think the big thing is planning ahead. I think the biggest issue we see in athletes who are traveling through time zones is just not planning far enough ahead. We know lives are busy, and actually trying to make sure we make that shift and prioritize it is really important, because ultimately it's going to, we get that wrong, that could send you in a bit of a spiral for 3 or 4 days when you're there. So we really don't really have the time to waste that. And I guess that's probably one of the things about going over to Oz a little bit sooner, is it does help out a little bit for those guys that perhaps struggle a bit more. But it's a really key thing to plan. And again, just trying to figure out and understand it a little bit in your head, because it can sound quite complicated, but when you write it out, or like you just explained really well there, Brad, it's just about trying to figure out. There's times when we're trying to trick the body into thinking, right, when are you going to go to sleep? And also then artificially at times go to the body, look, come on, we've got to push through. This is our new daylight. So it's trying to figure that out a little bit, and just make sure you've got it really well planned out.
Yeah, a lot of people do overcomplicate it, and it is a case of, take a look at it from a super simple point of view. Set your watch to destination time, and then try and focus on sleeping and waking in and around your kind of normal times by looking at your watch. And then, so that'd be the first kind of key simple point. And then the second kind of key simple point is, figure out when you need to get direct sunlight, because light, or even just light, turning the lights on, reading light on in the plane and that sort of thing, using screens, because light is the biggest determinant of changing the circadian rhythm. So you do those two things well, you're going to minimize your jet lag without needing to go into fancy timings of melatonin and all that sort of jazz. Just again, as we always come back to, focus on the basics, and once you nail them, the rest of it can just add to what is already a good process.
And it's funny you say about the basics. I think it's such a key point, because I think I had someone ask me this week about melatonin usage and kind of doing that flights. And actually, when we looked at what they were doing, they weren't doing any of the build-up prep. They weren't doing it. It was actually just a case of trying to knock themselves out on the plane and see if they could kind of force their way into it. And actually, what we kind of then looked at was it's probably quite a risky strategy of making that work, and it's not really going to be probably that effective. So actually doing it in a more natural way, getting the basics done right, you shouldn't necessarily need to use the melatonin, and that is probably finding that 5%. The other thing we spoke about as well, another real simple thing, is just, a lot of these long haul flights, the airlines are very good at feeding you. But as well, the other thing is when you're taking your food as well, like you were saying about that first flight that we get, say London to Singapore, for example, the idea that you get on that flight, we know we need to sleep. The idea that you then go and shove a load of food down your face when you first get up into the air is probably maybe one to miss, and go, look, carry some snacks and then maybe look to eat on that second flight when you're looking to have some caffeine, stay awake and trick your body into going, right, look, it's time to wake up.
Yeah, I find it amazing that the airlines don't operate on like destination time. Because you land somewhere in the evening, and they're like serving you breakfast or something like that. It's completely crazy. You'd think they would have kind of nailed that down themselves, but yeah, I always advise people to have their meal in the airport and not worry about getting the meal on the plane if they need to obviously go to sleep. So yeah, all those little things are a good start. And yeah, it's a common misconception on melatonin because it's not actually a sleeping tablet. It's not a sleeping medication. It's just simply, stimulates the hormone that creates drowsiness. To use melatonin correctly, you should actually take it to mimic midnight in destination locations. So, even just taking it before a flight isn't really going to help you, and it's not going to shift circadian rhythm. Or even if you take a sleeping tablet, you're not going to shift your circadian rhythm. You're just going to get some sleep and probably feel terrible afterwards when you're groggy when you wake up. So, yeah, if you're not getting the basics right, timing of sleep, timing of light, then I wouldn't even think about utilizing any medication, because it's only going to impact your performance once you're on the ground. So, talking about performance. Albert Park, street circuit. How's this race going to pan out? What's it like for the drivers?
Yes, it's an interesting circuit. I really like Melbourne. I think it's a lovely circuit. A lot of the feedback we get from drivers, it's a nice circuit to drive. It's technical. It's a tough circuit. So just going through the sectors a little bit. So coming into sector 1, super fast first corner. There's been some changes to that corner actually over the last couple of years. They've kind of moved the curbs a little bit to create a little bit more room. Notoriously, a few cars coming together, kind of T1 into T2. So they've widened that out a little bit over the last couple of years, but not a really technical kind of part of the track. Also really interesting, if we do get any rain, that T2 is a really tough section. You're not that far away from the wall, so something the drivers kind of have to be prepared for. Moving into kind of sector 2, really flowy section of the track, much faster now. Another section of the track that's experienced a lot of changes over the years. The biggest one taking out of the corner. So we've now got a super fast kind of T7 to T out, really high G forces, really tough area on the driver's neck. And then as we move into that kind of sector 3, again, lots of opportunities to overtake here. Some sharp hairpins and really hard braking zones. So really technical part of the track of that sector 3. Good opportunity for overtaking. But as a whole, really interesting street circuit actually. Still one to focus on. There's some super technical areas, but actually as a whole, a little bit more room here compared to some of the other ones we've had with Saudi and whatnot. So yeah, it's a little bit more room for error at certain points of the circuit.
Yeah, there's more room for sure, but as you quite rightly say, it is such a demanding track. There almost still isn't that room for error because the difficulty of the circuit itself, from both a physical and mental sort of perspective, there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously this time of year makes it a little bit better. We're expecting kind of temperatures in the kind of low to mid 20s. So for Australia, a lot of people kind of jump onto the heat wagon, but generally we're experiencing relatively high humidity. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be, from the forecast this weekend, it looks like we're expecting kind of 23, 24 degrees of temp. So some cooling strategies might be something to think about, but hopefully again, the drivers should be pretty well prepped for this after Saudi and whatnot, and after the winter.
Yeah, because they're going to have to, experience some high G forces again. There's a few corners are up around kind of 4.5 G's of force, particularly 10, 11, and 12. And it's quite a power circuit, isn't it? So there's some real good or real kind of hard braking demands as well. Those drivers going from like 320 kbh down to around 60 in just a couple of seconds. So that's going to create a decent amount of G-force on the neck extensors too. So yeah, but Melbourne, you never know what we're going to get. That is literally a place over a 4-day race weekend you could probably have every single season.
No, absolutely, yeah, and particularly in a track like Melbourne, I think expect drama certainly from turn one. We know that's quite a super technical turn as you come around kind of T1 into T2, getting the power downs. It's a slippery part of the track, and particularly add rain into the mix, it's going to make for some chaos. So yeah, definitely one of the more unpredictable tracks in terms of weather, which makes it hard for everyone. Drivers, strategists, everyone behind the scenes, and even for us as coaches, trying to make sure we're prepping and making sure you're covered for all eventualities. The minute you have bright sunshine, and then next thing you've got overcast rain, some visor changes might need to happen quite quickly. So
Yeah. One minute you're carrying the dry ice and a fan to keep the driver cool. The next minute you're whipping out an umbrella and trying to dry off the shoes, and it can be a place for that. That's for sure. So so we should see an exciting race then. 4 a.m. race start on Sunday. I'm sure Effie will probably have me up that early. So maybe me and her will sit under the duvet and watch the race on Sunday morning. That might be quite fun. I'll make the elite Formula PT breakfast burger, which went on our Instagram for the race day. As apparently Australians like a burger, and we're going to be needing some breakfast at that time of morning.
yeah, absolutely, a bit of a steep one for those in Europe, but yeah, no, that's early start, but yeah, it'll be a good race. Looking forward to it, and hopefully worth the early start.
Yeah, I always find that quite fun. I'm an early riser anyway, and I used to love it when the big fights in Vegas were on. Mayweather and Pacquiao used to fight at the MGM, and they used to be on so late in Vegas, but it always used to, by the time they started, it used to be like 4 a.m. in the UK. So, you get up with your coffee and your breakfast, and then you're into your day after. So then you got the day to yourself as well. So it's, I quite like it. Good. So talking about other sports, we're continuing on with our Padel series. We're on injury 4, I think, and the 4th most common injury in Padel players is, and I didn't expect this one, it is plantar fascia pain. So plantar fascia pain, more commonly known as plantar fasciitis. We don't really call it plantar fasciitis anymore. It's more plantar fasciopathy, albeit most people still know it as plantar fasciitis. The reason we have that kind of scientific name change is itis means inflammation in Latin, and what we now know with the plantar fascia is we treat it a little bit more like a tendon, and what we know is outside the first 72 hours there's not really any inflammation that sits around that tissue. It becomes a little bit more degenerative, shall we say. So best way to describe that is like kind of small micro tears within the tendon, which then, or in the fascia, which then makes it a little bit weaker. You have a number of other changes around there, so you get what we call neovascularization, so sort of small blood vessels, small nerve endings kind of creeping into those small tears, and the shearing on that can cause pain. And so in Padel, I think probably reasons for Padel players getting plantar fascia pain. I think probably shoes and footwear is likely an issue. Padel shoes are different. They're quite fixed in the heel, so people going into tennis-based shoes or padel-based shoes that are not used to it because they've taken up padel and never kind of played before, that will really change the dynamics of the feet, and obviously you're moving forwards, backwards, side to side, quite intense movements. So that'd be one reason. And then a second one, or I should have said this, number one, will be the simple thing of people just doing too much too soon, overloading that fascia, creating the pain, as we see in most things, but particularly tendon fascia type pain. Anything I would have missed there, Matt, or you see more of in terms of why people are getting plantar fascia pain? Because normally we see it in runners and stuff, don't we? More than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends a little on our populations as well. I think I probably see two different types of people that would present with it. Perhaps my then younger clients who are perhaps definitely again a more load-based issue when we kind of look at it, you're not used to it. I think incorrect footwear is the big one I've seen. So, a lot of people coming in gym or running based shoes, which provide great cushioning, but perhaps with a sport like that, where we've got a lot more change of direction, the footwear is perhaps not suitable for that and providing a lot of stress on the foot and the plantar fascia. So seeing a lot of that. And then I guess you're absolutely right. The other side of the spectrum is this kind of more degenerative tissue. It's a great sport. It's attracting some people who have not done it before. And often then we're seeing, again, a big spike in their load. And we're seeing this kind of more degenerative tendon having this big spike in load. So, no, I think nothing hugely different. But I think it's really the key thing when we see these plantar fascia is just identifying what is the root cause of why it's come on, and also seeing the correct treatment. Because I think it's probably one of I daren't say the few, but I think if you were to Google plantar fascia pain, I think it's probably one of the most misleading Googles in terms of what we do to treat these. I don't think it's that well understood.
Yeah, and actually it was we kind of didn't really change our thoughts on the plantar fascia. When was that rat lift paper in, like 2014, 2015, 2014, yeah. I think. So there was a big change in 2014 in the way that we treated plantar fascia pain. Because before that, it was all stretch the plantar fascia, stretch the calf, roll a golf ball under it, or a can of Coke, which has been in the freezer. Taping is actually very effective. I use taping a lot for plantar fascia just to offload the pain if you need to keep someone going. But it wasn't until 2014 a paper from Michael Ratliff, who's a Danish physio, I think, who developed a loading program for the plantar fascia, where we follow, similar to like the Achilles tendon. It's a full kind of structured calf raised loading program, but with a towel under the toe boxes to engage that plantar fascia a little bit more. And since then, some great results have come by it. Interestingly enough, though, and this is like my little claim to fame when it comes to plantar fascia. So I always used to, once I kind of done the stretching, the golf ball mass, like rolling, and had people do that and pain had settled, I always used to start to get people walking on their tiptoes. That was my kind of main rehab for plantar fascia pain. And if you look at the program now, it's all about loading with the toes kind of into extension. So I was doing that way before the rat lift paper, so I should have wrote it myself. So treatment wise, settle the pain down, load it up. I still think more so than tendons, and I don't really have a theory for this, but more so than tendons, I find actually still stretching the plantar fascia really helps. I can't tell you why, but I include that within my program, but I wouldn't include that in an Achilles tendon program. So no. I can't really explain why. Just anecdotally, I see that works a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if you vary this particularly, but I mean, I find that I probably have two groups of patients that I would treat in terms of I'm probably similar to you. In my more chronic ones, I've got no issue with stretching. A lot of them say it feels quite pleasant. They get some symptom relief from it, so we kind of lean towards it. Perhaps in some of my really acute ones, I'm a little bit more reluctant. But it's an interesting area. But I think I always go back to the idea of really just trying to understand which stage of plantar fasciopathy you're at. Is it an acute injury, or is it something that's kind of been nagging in the background for a little while? Because again, we might vary our treatment accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. It just reminded me actually. So you're right. You can kind of split them into two key areas: people that are super, super painful and maybe can't load at the moment, and people where the pain has settled and they need to absolutely smash the rehab and get it stronger. Within that kind of painful category, you can do your stretching, you can do your icing, you can do your golf ball massage. You can do your taping. The other thing is getting a gel heel insert can be quite effective. You can order them off Amazon, but it just gives that bit of extra cushioning in the shoes. Wearing indoor shoes can be really effective, like running type trainers or really supportive trainers. Don't go barefoot, socks, flip-flops, get support, get cushioning in and around that shoe. That's everything that we can do to try and settle the pain down. And then once that pain gets to a manageable part, then you can start really smashing the rehab and loading it up. So Good, good. And then, so yeah, Padel players, not too much too soon. And I think the big thing with that is, obviously there's a lot of changes of footwear, I think, for Padel players because no one really knows what to play in. You know, you start off playing in running shoes, but you realise your ankles are all over the place. Then some people try like normal kind of leather shoes, you know, like that Stan Smiths or that sort of thing, because they're a bit more supportive side to side. Then they go into Padel shoes, but you know they're not used to the heel fix and the way that the toe box is, you know, designed and stuff. So there's a lot of changes for the foot there. But another thing we see as well is people just aren't recovering in between Padel sessions because people are getting so into it. They play on a Monday, then they book the court again for a Tuesday, and then they play on a Tuesday, and then they do the same thing on a Thursday, and then a Saturday and a Sunday. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden they've done like 10 hours of Padel, and last week they did nothing.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I was chatting to a friend of mine who plays in South London, and again, same sort of thing was saying about the demand of the courts and trying to book a court. And again, you know, it's pretty rare. Well, I guess it's something in a recreational setting. The idea that, you know, there's not much in terms of progression. It's very rare that people start at 20 minutes and then they go up to 40 minutes. But more often than not, you book a court for an hour and you play for an hour because you feel like that's what you pay for. So this idea of kind of ramping or scaling that we might program with running and we program with cycling and swimming, we're just not seeing. People are going, cool, here's an hour, I've got an hour, I'm going to just try and get through it.
Yeah, and they play as much as they can within that hour. You know, no rest, just keep going. Let's make the most of the money that we spent, rather than build it up slowly. Yeah, and that's a very good point. Very good point. So, Padel players, be warned. It's great that you're getting into activity, but look after the body as well. We're gonna have to have a Padel strength and conditioning kind of workout, you know, some sort of course or something, isn't it? You know, like we do with runners. Runners need twice weekly strength and conditioning. Padel players are going to need some strength and conditioning programming to keep themselves fit, healthy, injury free, to keep playing Padel at the rate that they're playing it at. So cool, that's it. Hit us up, eliteformulapt.com, for your Padel strength programming. Good stuff, Matt. I think we've talked for long enough there. So we'll be watching the F1 this weekend, and then we're both going to be off racing in Paul Ricard the week after. So look forward to Elite Formula PT on tour, and let's catch up next week after the race, see how things are going, and see what's up next.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Yeah, we'll be on a racetrack together at the same point, at the same people. It's going to be an interesting. Mix.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. They don't know what they're getting.
Double trouble.
Brilliant. Double trouble. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, post about it on social media. We'll repost everything. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.